Dear colleagues, and now I would like to say hello to Susi Ferrarello. Can you hear me, Susi?
I can, thanks. You?
Great. And me.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to me to introduce to you Susi. She is a well-known researcher of the phenomenology of Husserl, and she has a PhD from, give me a second, from the Sorbonne in Paris, and MA in Human Rights and Political Science from the University of Bologna. And today Susi will give us a talk about Husserl ethics and psychiatry. So, great. Please.
Thank you, Alexander, and thanks for having me here and meeting you. Now, I never used Google Share. I'm trying to pull up my slides. It seemed easy, but apparently it's not. Okay.
There is a button on the, I don't know where it is, but there is a button. And yeah, okay. You can share your screen.
And
yeah, we see.
Can you see it? Sorry, Alexander, can you see it? I don't hear you.
Yeah. Before that, I can see your. Yeah, now.
Perfect. So I cannot see you, but I will see this. Okay, I needed to understand the deal. All right. So I study phenomenology, and in particular Husserl's phenomenology. And today I would like to give you just a few tidbits of what phenomenological ethics might mean. When I was studying at the beginning for my PhD, it seemed somewhat impossible to build a full Husserlian ethics because as you probably know, Husserl didn't write a full-fledged book on ethics. We have something like 10,000 pages of manuscripts, which they are diligently putting together at the archives in Leuven. But we didn't have, one book on ethics in particular. So we had to put together all these pages and try to build his thoughts about ethics. We had 2 volumes of his logic with the logical investigations. And not much more. So Husserl was a true researcher. He didn't want to, spend too much time in polishing his book to publish. He just published this book through which he got his professorship at Halle, the logical investigations. And then he kept researching, he kept writing. So my biggest problem when I started studying Husserl's ethics was, okay, from where should I start to put his ethics together? And of course, I'd say, let's start from phenomenology. He's a phenomenologist. Let's see, he's the founder of phenomenology. Let's see how his ethics is built in within his phenomenological mind, because I wouldn't say that it's just a system. It's for Husserl a way of living, doing phenomenology. So let's start from here, very basic. What is phenomenology? Phenomenology is, of course, a very old term. I mean, we already knew phenomenology from Hegel, even from Kant, from D'Alembert. So it's certainly something that didn't start with Husserl, but phenomenology as we know it today is mostly Husserlian. And it comes from the combination of these 2 words, logos to phenomenon. Logos, as you know, means investigation, reasoning, and so on, and phainomai is what appears to me. Phainomai is what comes to me. immediately. Epiphany, for example, is one word that comes from this root, is the immediate revelation of something. Now, what is this something? Often this something is an ontological region. What does he mean by ontological region? Ontos is the Greek root to say being. So the ontological region is basically this region of being that appears to us. So, for example, now I'm looking, unfortunately, at this computer, not directly at your face. This computer is what immediately appears to me, is my phenomenon, my region of being. And this region of being is not so nicely organized because, you know, perception is quite a messy business. The data of my perception come to me in a disorganized way. I might perceive first, I don't know, the green of my screen, and then the texture, and I might not be able to put all this information together. This is, for example, the condition of people ill with suffering from Alzheimer, or the people who are suffering from aphasia, the people who cannot speak or form sentences. It might happen sometimes that all the data of this being come to me, and I don't know how to combine them together, but I'm receiving them. And it's the combination, the packaging, let's say, of my information is a job of the formal ontology. So I come to combine together the data of my cognition through a form, because my brain, for some reason, and this is something that Kant has already understood, combines this data into a continuum semanticum in time. So I tend to organize this data according to a sentence, according to a linearity of meaning that makes sense for me. How are you doing? So far, so good. Unfortunately, I cannot see your faces, and feel free to interrupt me if things don't flow well for you, okay? So, now, another very brilliant thing that Husserl understands in the way in which we describe reality is that the organization of my perception is different from the organization of my meanings, of the meanings I make of this perception. When he started doing phenomenology, he was studying the slice of the phenomena according to a picture. So I'm, for example, now looking at this cup. I take a picture of this cup and I do phenomenology. So I try to describe, here is the cup. I try to describe the, I don't know, the texture of the cup. I try to describe how the angle, how it looks in this specific time, and in this way I have the sense for what this cup would look like, because this is absolutely still. Now, the problem is that life is much more complex than that. We don't know life through static pictures, because life is genesis. It's something that flows through time and in time. So he said, okay, to understand how the phenomenon appears to me, I have to consider this phenomenon as a static picture, but also as a becoming genetic. So he has combined static phenomenology with genetic phenomenology. Static phenomenology would look at the phenomenon as a static picture, and this kind of phenomenology is the phenomenology that you see used in psychology. Most of the qualitative methods used in psychology are using static phenomenology. Genetic phenomenology instead is quite more complex because genetic phenomenology tries to use time as a becoming. So while we look at the phenomenon, we try to anticipate this cup as it rolls, what is behind the cup, what I don't see here, how it will look like once I finish my coffee, and so on and so on. So it looks at the phenomenon in its being. So you understand how it was complex for me while I was trying to do ethical phenomenology, or better, ethics in phenomenology, how to combine both, right? Because one thing is to consider the goodness of an action as it happens here now, static phenomenology. So I consider this ontology of being as this person who acts in this moment. Another thing is to consider all the motivations, all the past, present, and future lived experience of the person who is trying to behave in the right way in that moment. How do you consider the ethical behavior of somebody according to a genetic perspective? So I had to find a way to combine static and genetic phenomenology together. Well, it's not I had to find a way to understand how Husserl combined static and genetic phenomenology in his ethical thinking. And so I go to the next slide. Okay.
Susi, we can see your screen.
Yeah, I will share it. Promise. It's just that for a moment I wanted to see you and do my wonderful cup example with your faces in front of me. Okay, so the way to combine these two aspects was through intentionality. Intentionality in general in phenomenology is the way through which we connect to the lived experience. Why? Because as the etymology of the word say, intentionality is intendere, or in Greek, en teinein. So we connect to what is outside because this something that is outside of me somehow appears to me, comes to me, I see it. And in this appearing is already inside of me. There's already a bridge that I made between myself and this object. And this bridge we call intentionality. So clearly, when I look at my computer, when I look at my cup, I can see the cup, I can see the computer. They are part of me. But they are not as they are outside. So Brentano is the one who revived this concept that of course belonged to Aristotle, Stoics, and so on. The object that appears outside of me is in esse, is inside of me, but in a new way. It's a representation, it's a mental presence. We don't know how we transform the phenomena in our minds. Nevertheless, some kind of process happens in that connection, and the content of our intention is not anymore the object as it is outside, but is the object as it is meant, as it is intended by us. So the way to look at reality, look at the world through the point of view of the static picture and the genetic ongoing being is via intentionality. So we try to understand how the content of our reality are transformed once we perceive them, once we come in contact with them, once we mean them in a certain way. And while with static phenomenology we had more or less one intentionality, and Husserl was describing it according to Noesis and Noema, or quality and matter, saying, one thing is what you perceive, another thing is the way in which you perceive it. So, I don't know, again, my cup is this cup, so the material of the cup, and the way in which I describe it, quality, this cup. So intentionality is basically built on these two structures in static phenomenology, quality and matter. Quality is a formal ontology, the way in which I say this is a cup, and matter is the content, the cupness, the thing that makes this cup a cup. In genetic phenomenology, things has to become more complex, because I have to be capable of describing the becoming of my experience as it happens in real life. For this reason, in his later manuscripts, Experience and Judgment, which became, of course, a book thanks to Landrebe, or I don't know, the lectures on passive synthesis, which became a book thanks to the scholars in Leuven, we start seeing many ways of describing intentionality. Here I summarized just 3 of them: passive intentionality, practical intentionality, and active intentionality. But inside each of these categories, there are plenty of ways to describe intentionality. Now, what are these intentionalities? Let's go to passive intentionality. Passive intentionality is basically what Freud would describe as the unconscious. One very small side note here. Freud and Husserl had the same teacher, Brentano. So it's not so weird, it's not so strange that at some point Ricoeur, for example, started writing about phenomenology and psychoanalysis. It's not so strange to find in Husserl signs of the connection between phenomenology, ideas that might remind you of certain aspects of psychoanalysis, because they were both exposed to the same teacher, to the same lectures. Not all of them, but certainly that teacher was quite meaningful for both of them. So passive intentionality might remind us about the unconscious, because there's no ego in passive intentionality. There's no subject that woke up, so to speak, and said, I do something, I see, I perceive. Passive intentionality is basically this strange combination of the time that goes on and a will, a volition that at some point has to become mine. So in passive intentionality, you have this matter, and you are matter along the other matter. You are these contents, because most of our life we are not awake. We are not ready to take action. While I'm speaking, for example, clearly I'm taking action on my thoughts, but I'm not taking action on, I don't know, my sense of hunger, or how my legs are feeling, or the sense of tidiness in the background. My body is more or less living its life without me being present to it. I'm present now only to my thoughts, because I'm focused to express these thoughts. So, passive intentionality is basically the life of being, the life of matter as it flows. And in this life, we see the a priori of time, and I will not go into time, but my God, if it's a complex subject in Husserl, we have several groups of manuscripts that are focused on the notion of time. But in general, time flows and is still present in such a way that organizes this matter in groups of similarities and differences. So he says that the data of our perception tend to come together according to homogeneity. So those who are similar to each other tend to come together, those who are different are more distant, and they form a group of meanings that at some point my will have to accept or not. I don't know, when you start feeling hungry, there's at some point an organic signal that comes up to you and says, hey, this might be hunger. And you are there. For example, if I start feeling hungry now, my will say, no way, I'm talking. I don't want to accept this knowledge now. I will not even taking it into consideration because I want to act on my thoughts. I want to express those meanings. So there's always this ich kann, ich tue. I can, I act, that has to decide what to do with all these habits, instincts, drives that come to me as passive synthesis, as passive data. There's always at some point the moment of decision in which I take action on the ongoing flow of data that are present to me. And of course, I can take action only on a very small portion of the reality I'm in contact with. Because of course, at some point I decide that this is my body, I take responsibility for this body, I take responsibility for all the meanings that come to me. But this body, again, is a fruit of my decision here and now. Because if I had a higher conscience, I would say I take responsibility of this body as a body interconnected with other bodies. I take responsibility of this body and the environment in which it is, and so on and so on. And when I say I take responsibility, I mean I will make an aware decision on all the data, all the information that come to me. I don't know, littering is one example. I feel the need of, I finish my cigarette and my instinct just says to throw it on the floor. If my level of conscience of my body as part of the environment is higher, I would understand that throwing the cigarette on the floor would mean throwing the cigarette on me, basically, would mean damaging myself directly. So, this moment of awareness, of acceptance, of awakening is the step of practical intentionality. Basically, with practical intentionality, my subjectivity, my ego is awake and exerts its will on the affective matter, which is the primary synthesis. What do I mean by affective matter with an A? I'm sorry, here the slide is a little bit small. Affective matter is basically what affects me. It's not just, my emotional feeling. I don't mean here affection as something that touches me emotionally. I mean affection as something that can affect me. So there is always something that affects us, which could be, I don't know, being in company with another person or sleeping and at some point feeling the need to go to the bathroom, or I don't know, even if you're still sitting in a room, at some point you want to scratch your nose. Life is always bothering you. Life is this strong stream that sends you messages continuously. And you have to decide what message you want to take and how you want to act in relation to this message. This is the core of Husserl's ethics. Being able to exert your practical intentionality, meaning your awoken decisions, your awake ego, in a deeper and deeper level of interconnection between yourself and the life that is around you. So active intentionality, which is the last branch of intentionality, is the way in which we try to transform into meanings our interactions with life. Besides my academic career, I do also philosophical counseling. So I tend to meet people in my office, they come with their problems, and what I do, they don't know that, of course, they don't need to, is to help them to transform all the matter of their life, which according to this slide I would call passivity of their life, but not as a judgmental meaning to say, they are passive with what they do. Passivity in the sense of what they are not aware of, but still it belongs to their life. I try to transform this passivity into activity, into meanings. So what is not intentional, but yet it's part of our life, it constitutes the content of our life, has to be expressed, quality, has to find names, has to find a language. Plenty of my clients, I don't know, they might be mad, but they don't know at what. They feel frustrated, but they don't even recognize the presence of frustration in their life. They feel unfulfilled, or the richest ones I noticed, they lack meaning. They don't know anymore how to reconnect to meanings in their life because they had to go without reconnecting with their deeper being, with their actions. So I noticed that most of the psychological and ethical problems arise when these three forms of intentionality are disconnected from each other. Sometimes we have to work just on the layer of active intentionality because we are told what to do continuously, and we have to make money, we have to survive. So, okay, just wake up, wash yourself, get ready, go to work, come back, sleep, let's start all over again. In this way, you try to give a shape, you try to give a form to your life, active intentionality. But clearly, this active intentionality is not connected in any way to your sense of awakening, your sense of I decide to do this and that of my passive life, of what my body is feeling now, in this moment, in this place. And you can see how this might generate a certain sense of loss. On the other way around, it might happen that on the level of passive intentionality, people experience big traumas and they want this trauma to remain far away from any meaning activity. I had a client who, poor woman, she was raped, and she locked these meanings so far away from her that we managed to discover it and reconnect it after 1 year. Of course, I'm not doing psychotherapy, I'm not doing psychoanalysis. I was trying to help her to recreate meanings. And she came to my office because she was mad at her husband because he was also her jiu-jitsu trainer, and she couldn't understand why she was so mad at him. It took us 1 year to unpack that meaning. So, at the core of Husserl's ethics and in general Husserl's phenomenology, there's this ongoing interplay between the passivity of the subject and the activity of the subject. The goal of practical intentionality is to create an ongoing interconnection between the two. If we disconnect the two, okay, the passivity becomes a kind of a weight that we drag around and doesn't serve us in any way. If we are only on the active side of intentionality, we can very nicely align with what is considered normal, with a normal kind of life, because we just do what society tells us to do, but at some point we lose our chance to create real meanings. So practical intentionality is the most ethical, if you want, a form of intentionality through which you make choices of what your life should look like. And of course, as you can see, this intersects very deeply with psychology, because in doing that, you enter in the ontological region, in that sphere of being that belongs to your psyche, your spiritual matter. And this is all. I know that you are interested in neuroethics, neurophenomenology as well, and there are scholars who developed this area of study by expanding on the neurological pattern. So here there's this book that is very helpful in this area, Roche, Thompson, and Varela especially, who basically tried to explain the passivity of our intentionality by looking at the neuronal pattern that are created every time we experience a certain phenomenon. And while the phenomenology maps the reflexivity. So basically when we look at passive intentionality, we look at something in which, as I said before, the subject is not there, and we just, without reflection, we just react to things. Which is an interesting problem in terms of media technology. We are developing a kind of an education to reaction. When we study neurophenomenology, we try to study this level of reaction and transform it into reflection. So by creating this map, we become aware of what kind of neuronal pattern we have in our mind when a certain experience happens. Through this awareness, we can modify not only our reaction to that, but also the pattern. I don't know, there's an example of neuroethics applied to people with depression. They say, if you know you are depressed, maybe when you go to sleep, right before you go to sleep, think of 5 things that you liked during your daily life. When you wake up, don't grab your phone as first thing you do. Think of how 3 of the people you love in your life are doing. Try to send them good thoughts. Thank your body for being with you in the morning. You know, trying to change through your thoughts the neuronal pattern that was maybe created when you were younger and is still affecting your well-being. So this interplay, which I would call between active and passive intentionality, or reflexivity and reflectivity, is of course something that here there's this difficult term, is ontopoiesis, meaning it creates poiesis, a new kind of being, onto, inside ourselves, because we take action on it. What's the risk? The risk could be hard determinism. So we are just our neurons, we are just our experience, there's nothing else than that. If we avoid going toward hard determinism and an excess of naturalization, and we keep our minds open to the mystery of our soul, to the mystery of our spirit, what we can gain from this kind of outlook on reality and the way to explain it is clearly, I think, a deeper understanding of human functioning, which is clearly compatible with natural sciences and human sciences. So it can create really a great synergy with the study of the being and the human being as a whole. So that's all for me. Thank you for listening. I hope it was understandable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susi. And any question, colleagues?
Hello, Susi.
Hello.
Thank you for your awesome report. And how do you think? What is the border between inside and outside me when I talk about the relations between people? What empathy is and how this quality can help people to erase the border between me and others in the coming neuro-revolution conditions? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a wonderful question. Thanks. I'm very grateful because I noticed that while I was talking that I kept saying inside and outside, which I really don't like, but it's a very effective way to explain intentionality. But yes, there's no inside and outside. In fact, this is one of the biases that we inherited from modern philosophy. What Husserl is trying to do, as far as I understood him, is to explain life in terms of interconnection, in the sense that if passive intentionality is this flow of life in which I am caught, and here we come back to Heraclitus, right? We come back to pre-Socratics. I'm not saying really anything new. If life is this flow and I connect to it every time I wake up, but I wake up in my mind and I say, I am doing this, I am making meanings of this, clearly there's no big distinction between inside and outside. There's the subjective will of my action, but even the subjective will of my action, as Husserl said in his volumes on intersubjectivity, is an I-DAO. I mean, even in my being an I, my being a subject, I'm already an interlocutor with an alterity. Otherwise, I wouldn't say just I. So it seems that we are caught in an ongoing flow interconnections. And empathy, and this is a question that I'm not the best person to answer, because I'm putting together now an edited volume on empathy and ethics, and I realized how ignorant I am on the part of the empathy part of all this. There's really interesting, many interesting studies around there, around on empathy, but. If we take it from the Greek etymology, empathy is en paskein, meaning I suffer, paskein, en, inside with the other person. So in 1904, they introduced empathy in German language with Einfühlung. I feel one with the other person. So empathy, etymologically speaking, can be described as this ability to be one with the person you are interacting with. Now, I have the feeling that my colleagues would scold me if I describe empathy in this way, though, because they say, you know, Susi, I think that this would be sympathy and not empathy, because with empathy, you keep your being, your distance from the other person. The empathetic doctor, the empathetic psychotherapist is the one who can truly understand what the other is going through, but is not one with that person. He has a resource of personal resilience, of personal life that is separated from that. So I would say that, in empathy, there's this ability of understanding the other person while being your own subject, while being aware that you are somehow the driver of your life. So, I don't know, codependent relationships, for example. In the couple, at some point, the two become one person, but in a very bad way, because you delegate to the other the things that you don't have, and vice versa. In that case, there's no empathy. And in fact, codependent relationships can be very rageful, because you want the other person to complete you. You want the other person to do what you cannot do, right? So that is really not true empathy. In real empathy, you know that you have to take responsibility of what happens in your life. So if, I don't know, you have a client that is devastated in front of you, you can feel for that person, you can understand what's going on in that person's life, but you know that you are responsible for your feeling. It's not that person responsible, or you are not responsible for the feeling of the other person, which is something that sometimes happens in strange cases of communitarian narcissism or so on. So I think that is the big difference between sympathy, empathy, and, if you want, these borders between inside and outside. The sense of responsibility you are going to take for what is going to happen within your region of being, your region of experience. I hope I answered the questions.
Thank you very much. And we have a time. Any question? Please.
Great pleasure. Oh, pardon. Sorry. Hi, Susi.
Hi.
Thank you for your moving report. It was very interesting.
Oh.
I have a sort of methodological question to you.
Approved.
What sort of practices do you use to transform the passive intentionality into the active one? That's it.
That's a very good question. Yeah, you know, I think that it's a natural process. I think that Husserl is trying to take a picture of how life works itself through. So I think that quite naturally in our life we tend to, experience things and try to make meanings out of it. Yet, to answer your question, how do we do when this doesn't happen naturally? One thing I notice through my clients is that they are the best mirrors, because sometimes I cannot look at myself, and the best way to look at myself is by looking at life around me. And I notice that the one way we use to transform passivity into meanings is looking for a thrill. Falling in love with another person, your marriage or your relationship is incredibly stagnating, you don't know why, what you're doing don't make sense at all. One escamotage is looking for a thrill that wakes you up. Of course, this is not a method, this is just another way in which we try to break with the absence of meaning. The method that then I try to advise my clients to use is becoming the best reporters of their lives. Now I had this client that is really fun. He's a financial analyst. He's super busy. He has this very wealthy, busy life, and he was complaining because his sexual life with his partner was not as good as it was before. And he didn't want to cheat because he deeply loved his wife, but he couldn't understand why his life was stagnating so much at that point. So I asked him, please, observe your life. Be a reporter, stay there, look at the habits that has stopped serving meaning into your life. He came back to me in the second meeting. He's Indian, so he's very, I had to learn to be understood by him, because my ways weren't good with him. I had to be very assertive with him. So 2, 3, 4 meetings, he always came back to me without a description of his life. It was a very superficial description. Finally, he came back with a good description of at least 3 or 4 habits that were clearly disrupting the meanings of his life. Going to bed with your phone, not having meaningful connection throughout the whole day with his partner, having to take phone calls 24/7. He managed to look at his life and he found at least 4 or 5 habits that kept going in the passivity of his life, and were not bringing meanings into his life, into the life he wanted to have. So what I asked him is, now that you have the habits, what decision do you want to make in relation to these habits, which basically represented the passive intentionality? Habits are strong. Habits are way stronger than we think. At the beginning, he said it was impossible to break any of them. There was a big reason behind any habit that he had, even the habit of being with the phone in bed. In the end, after 2 or 3 meetings, we managed to break these habits as well. And now he's rebuilding his life, not all his life, but a meaningful part of it, according to practical intentionality, according to a decision that he's making on the instincts that keep pushing on him. Because of course he's very busy, of course his job is high pressure, but of course he loves his wife. And he doesn't want to give up on his wife because of his work. So he's trying to reshape the meanings of his life according to a new geometry.
Thank you very much, Susi. We have one more question.
Hello, thank you for your report. I would like to continue a previous question. Is there some signs that these different layers of intentionality are matched to each other? or how it could be checked that there is perfect match between these different layers of intentionality?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question yet. I think I have an intuition, but not full understanding.
I meant that you mentioned that in your therapy, you can reveal that different layers of intentionality aren't compatible, aren't matched with each other. And is there some signs or some features of match of these layers, and how can you define that they are not in this perfect harmony? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. That's a very interesting question as well. Yeah, I guess that when there's frustration, when in general, when a person comes to my office, it's because something is not going well. So when I see a person grasping for meaning or being frustrated about what is in the present, I try to check if the alignment is there. I mean, it might happen that they are not yet making meaning of their life. So active intentionality is a little bit disaligned in relation to the passive intentionality. And it's not that big, and I have just to, ask a few questions about, okay, what do you think about your present life? How was your relationship with your parents? Trying to see if everything makes meanings in their lives. I noticed that it's much more difficult when a traumatic experience happened in the past is completely not owned by the subject. So when there is a portion of passive intentionality that has not been owned, acted on by the subject, that is way more difficult. And through my experience, if I have to be honest, it reveals itself through a form of coldness. I believe a sense of detachment from the person who is sharing the experience with me, and I try to understand what is detached from. And that is a very difficult job to pursue. And I don't know if I managed to reconnect every time. Then I reconnected the experiences, right? So at some point they tell me about, I had a client who had very abusive parents, and he really didn't want to acknowledge that because in his culture, in this case he was German, it was somehow too feminine to complain about harsh parents. Nevertheless, we finally managed to, for him to say, okay, my parents were a little too harsh with me. So we connected the dots, and he left my office because I generally don't like. I'm not a therapist, so for me the job is to create meanings, and when that is done, we're done. So he left my office. But I always feel, who knows if I did right to him, in the sense that I keep experiencing that sense of detachment, that sense of coldness. So it's not that I feel, okay, now everything is done. But that's what I think I can do when it's in the passivity. When it's in the activity, it's much easier, the disalignment, I mean. I hope I answered. This is a very difficult question.
Susi, one more question.
Absolutely.
Thank you for very interesting and very friendly report. At the same time, I would like thank you for your book. Husserl Ethic and Practical Intentionality. Yes, just This year I've defended my PhD thesis about correlation between practical and theoretical knowledge in Husserl's phenomenology, and your book was very,
Congratulations!
very...
So happy that somebody is doing it. Oh, thank you, great,
This
wonderful.
book very, very useful to me. It's really...
Oh.
And,
Thank you. You know, when you write, you are always alone in your room and you think, okay, nobody will ever read this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, in your opinion, should the present-day psychologist take into account the requirement of Husserl about scientific foundation of psychology? I mean, the transcendental reduction.
Thank you. This is a very good point. You know, now at this point in my career, I don't know anymore if I'm a psychologist, am I a philosopher. When I'm with philosophers, they tell me that I'm not a philosopher, I'm a psychologist. When I'm with psychologists, they tell me, you're a philosopher. But because my work is very much in between the two at this point, and when I hang out with the psychologists, I realize that they really need my philosophical knowledge, because otherwise their psychological theoretical studies don't go far. If I don't know, now I'm of course in the circle of qualitative psychologists, so Louis Sass, Magnus Englander, Appenbaum, they are trying necessarily to develop a form of psychology that presupposes the presence of a transcendental ego, which is basically the ego that wakes up and represents the condition of possibility for things to be in a certain way. If you don't reconnect with that transcendental ego, if you don't apply reduction, if you don't apply epoche, the risk is that you keep repeating over and over the same pattern. The risk of psychology, which was the critique of Dewey and pragmatism in general, is basically to reproduce the life experience as it is and introduce here and there some technique to twitch, to adjust the problem, which is wonderful and clearly effective. But if we want to get out of problems as heavy as narcissism, and I'm sorry, my God, narcissism is dangerous, and we are seeing it so clearly in this moment of our critical society. Schizophrenia, autism, borderline personalities. I mean, there are still psychiatric conditions that are so mysterious to us that we cannot fix them through a medicalized psychiatry or a technological psychology, meaning that we cannot fix these problems if we looked at the lived experience and we try to fix it from the lived experience itself. Because we basically reproduce the problem, sometimes with the same intensity, because we stigmatize the problem and we say, okay, that person has to be isolated through medication, we numb them and so on. If instead we bring the reflection on the transcendental level and we try to map these very difficult lines that connect the lived experience of a person in a cycle that generates meanings, then maybe we can do something. There's Fuchs, for example, in Heidelberg. He's doing great stuff with phenomenology. He's a psychiatrist, and he has this lab at the University of Heidelberg, and they are using phenomenology to deal with serious psychiatric conditions. So yes, absolutely, we should. And I don't care if it's phenomenology or any other philosophical approach. It doesn't make sense that philosophy is detached from psychology or psychiatry. That was the need for Wundt and other scholars at the time to organize, sciences, to organize knowledge. And I don't think it makes still sense.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't have time, but I would like to say you big thanks for your connection.
Thank you.
I'm sure that for our participants, this experience was fruitful, helpful. So, and I hope that in the future we can organize one more time session with you. So, have a good day and bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care, all of you, and well, thank you. Bye.
Bye bye, Susie. Bye.